right, we should be live. Alex, you want to test your mic?
Test. Hello.
All right.
Roll for initiative, Sid.
I know what that means now. Yeah, so welcome everybody who's watching us. If you're watching us tonight, that's great. Give a shout out in the chat. Let us know that you're here. And if you watch this later, leave a comment and let us know what your thoughts are, and just join us in the conversation. At the end of the day, that's the thing we want to hear. We want to connect with the communities. So what are we talking about tonight? Tonight we're talking about the RPG campaign that we ran on Saturday. Alex led, amazing DM. It was so much fun. So I thought it would be good to kind of break this down, talk about some of the inspiration, some of the concepts, and then dig into the actual gameplay for it. So, all right, let's do this. So first thing I gotta ask, because this is an interesting project for me because I did not ask you to do this. This is just something you did and started running with. So why did you want to do a Genesis D&D campaign?
One night I was just laying in bed, had my notebook right beside me, and I was like, I have an idea. I just wrote it down.
Gabe was part of the decision process.
Yeah, I'll warn the you guys now. There's nobody else in the house, so Gabe will probably walk into the room a lot.
We'll have special guest appearances by Gabe.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I think I'll further that a little bit more because it started with me designing my own champions and just sort of drawing and writing my own champions down and sort of making my own system on how to build a champion because I didn't have that a long time ago, right?
yeah, that's definitely newer tools that I've been sharing with people. The idea so you just had inspiration hit you and you're like, okay, this is doable. That's really awesome. What about it? Like, is there anything about Genesis in particular that you think lends itself to an RPG D&D concept a little bit more than something else, or do you just think like what made Genesis a good candidate?
So it's a fantasy setting, so that in itself you can run an RPG on it. But nowadays you can run an RPG on anything, and it's really about I enjoy Genesis, so I wanted to play a RPG inside the Genesis world.
Nice. Perfect. So we had a really crazy kind of like deck building process of building out the character, all that kind of stuff. How similar is that concept than a standard D&D or other RPGs? What were the things that you had to tweak, and what were the things that were the same?
So, I guess I should start with my experience in other RPGs.
Yeah.
So, my main focus for RPGs is D&D. I started playing in 3rd edition, 3.5, revised, then 4th edition, and the current edition that is 5th. I've also run many Pathfinder games, which is Pathfinder, for people who don't know, they bought the rights to the 3.5 editions of Dungeons & Dragons, which was considered the best version at the time. When 4th came out, it was too much like a video game. So there was a big divide in the community at that point. And then usually when I go to conventions, I'll play some weird ones. I've played ones where you're like a cat. I'm trying to remember all the weird ones. I played the Game of Thrones RPG. And other various little ones. Oh, Luchador, the Way of the Mask. That was a very fun one. You play essentially. It's like you have to be as over dramatic as possible as you are a luchador wrestler in real life. It's literally part of the RPG experience. So it's like you believe you can grapple a building and toss it over, go for it. You try to be as ridiculous as possible.
Nice.
Anyway, yeah. So I played a lot. So what did I pull from here? That's when it started to get more difficult because I had to decide: was I going to go more D&D or was I going to go more Genesis? And I decided to go more Genesis, and that's where I think the big difference is.
Mm-hmm.
If you start looking at the characters at first glance, they almost look like regular champions.
Yeah. I think that.
There is some changes I would do to it now that I've done a little bit to it.
Okay.
But on first glance, just looking at the standard character sheet, you have the health, you have the aura, you have the energy, you have the awareness, and then you have your attacks, your abilities, your affiliations. And then the main only difference is in the top right, there's a little shield representing your armor class.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That was really the biggest difference that you see from like the core abilities, yeah. Or the core stats.
Mm-hmm. There's Lauren Ipsum in the first two character sheets I just noticed.
Yep.
On top of their exert.
Yep, I noticed them, don't worry.
So the standard RPGs, they usually focus stat wise on the prowess of the physical being and mental ability of a character. So their strength, their dexterity, their constitution, their reflex, their wisdom, intellect, and charisma. So essentially all various aspects of the self. And so we don't really have that so much in Genesis. So it was more open-ended for physical building. At the end of the day, you guys got to choose. You had. It's not like you were completely had none of that. Like you chose health, so obviously a person with more health is a healthier person, right?
Yeah.
But so our stats were health, aura, energy, awareness, attack, ability, and chi. So the very different ones, obviously, that you wouldn't normally see is chi is 100% a Genesis thing.
Yeah.
Chi is 100% thing, and then abilities are extremely unique. Where there are some RPGs that you would create your own abilities. Those are more unique ones. But generally, it's sort of like, here is the character, and you can just pick an ability from this set abilities when building a character.
Well, yeah. And then, then we had the whole entire process of making the deck. Now, is that something that's standard in an RPG? Because that felt very Genesis-esque.
Yeah, I don't know any RPGs that use a deck like that. There's some that use a deck of cards at the most, but
yeah,
that's about it. The fourth edition did have cards per se, but not like this.
Yeah, and for people who weren't part of the RPG, something to know was like the deck building process. We're told basically like you pick this many 3 chi cards, this many 4 chi cards, 5, 6, 7s, and 8s, and you built a 40 card deck. And the nice part was it very much felt like a twist on designing a standard Genesis deck.
Yeah.
And this is one of the things I'm going to dig into a little bit more as we go into this talk. But I personally, coming from the experience that I've never played an RPG, like a published RPG before, and coming into this, I was like, I still can lend a lot of value to my team because I'm good at Genesis. I may not be good at the RPG side, but when it comes to the Genesis side, I can still contribute. And I love that element about this. So there's so much I loved, and I want to dig into those things, but I want to know a lot more about the design process. How did you get to this point? Because it was cool. I really liked it. Okay, so
one thing I would like to say about your last statement, as with all the 4 players there, I would say you were the most who was strategizing the most. You made these little plans. You're like, guys, I'm gonna move to the left, and then you can move out of the way, and you'll be free to move. And then I would spoil that for
you. So I did not realize until we were partway into that first combat when you're like, I can see your hand, and I'm like, this feels so weird now because I know you're the DM, you need to know this information, but at the same time, you were playing a game of Genesis, and it doesn't feel fair that you have mind readings all the time.
I will say 100% that did not affect any of my plays.
Yeah. No, I felt that. I
But
definitely felt that you were being honest with that, and you were doing it mainly to just help facilitate the process, if needed. But at the same time, it did feel like, sometimes I'd have this like idea. I'm like, oh, I really want to bait them into this move or bait my opponent into this move, and it's like, but I know he knows that I'm planning this.
yeah. And that was the thing. There was a lot of, because it was A, my first time running it, and B, all your guys' first time running it, and there was no there's no rule book. I didn't write a rule book for you guys.
Yeah.
To read ahead of time. I needed access because there's going to be these weird scenarios where somebody's like, "How does this work?" Yeah. Now, generally, my answer was just like Genesis.
Yep.
But
no,
but otherwise, just in case, there was a few. I think you had asked me a question. I don't remember. Like, I guess you asked, do I need to roll for sidestep? And I'm like, no, it doesn't interact with anybody.
Yeah.
You just have to pay the costs of the card.
Yeah. So, a little bit from my thinking. So, I've mentioned this a lot on different streams, different conversations. I've never played a published RPG. I've never played any of the D&Ds, any of these other more obscure ones. I've never sat down to do an actual RPG campaign. But when I was little, my brother used to make a lot of these. So Freed, if you ever watch this, know that a lot of my game design concepts came from the stuff he used to do when we were kids. And he used to make, we would be traveling to someone's house, and we knew that we're visiting with like my mom's friends, and they don't have any kids. So it'd be the four of us hanging out for the next 3-4 hours. We needed something to do. So my brother, on the car ride there, would write out a campaign and use graph paper and make dungeons. And we would get there, and he would have like a stat builder where you had just say 10 points, 15 points. You put into all your stats, and then you go into the campaign, and the three of us, he would play as a DM. The other three of us would run as heroes and go through the campaign. And this felt very similar to that. So the fact that I haven't played any D&D, do you think that this is a huge jump for people who've only played D&D and came into this? Or do you think it's a few mental shifts, but more or less they'll be able to grasp it?
There's a few mental shifts, because you definitely... The reason why everybody here was able to grasp it so easily because they all play Genesis. If you've never played Genesis before at all, I think there'll be a lot of extra steps.
Yeah.
But otherwise, no. I think the understanding of an RPG... it's pretty simple if you played it a little bit.
Yeah.
Once you know the basics of the Genesis, like you move first, you have 2 moves, but if you do 2 moves, you only do swifts. Like it's that simple stuff that you need to figure out. That's pretty much it. Like there's nuances that they'll need to learn.
Okay. Now, what was my next thought? So the character building, where we had 15 points of put it across our characters' different stats. You sat down with all 4 people and did this. I know for me personally, that felt like a very simple, like I knew what I was doing. I threw my points into there and went for it. You said for the other people, it was a little bit more of a thought process. Was there something I was missing, or what do you think, like, how different is that from standard RPGs? And was there something that I was missing when I made my character?
Oh, I don't think you missed anything. I'll say when it comes to standard RPGs, it usually takes a lot longer than what we did.
Okay.
So that's the one thing I guess you haven't experienced. Building a character usually takes a long time.
Yeah.
Unless you're just making anything. So the 2 people which I think took the longest was Brad and Will, which is no problem with that. It was Steve was pretty quick to it. But no, I would say 100% you were the fastest. I think you understood your goal and role of what you want to do with your character, and then it was just simple. You're like, I'm playing a fighter. I'm also gonna be in the front. I'm gonna be in the front line. I need lots of health.
Yeah.
Boom! You put a bunch of health in. You're like, okay, I'm a fighter. I don't really need that much aura. I don't remember. Actually, I can grab your sheet. It's right over here. You didn't put any points in aura right away. I'm pretty sure
Yeah.
you gain. Did you gain that later from?
I
think,
got it
choosing
from
affiliation?
Yes. Did I? No,
Yeah.
I got it. I got it some other way. I think I can't remember, but yeah, I definitely was like, no. It's because when I realized I didn't need awareness, and I was like, oh, I can put these points somewhere else. But yeah, I did not.
Fair enough.
Yeah. So HP, it was definitely like, okay, because it's the same as building a regular champion in Genesis. So if I'm playing a fighter, my core stats are HP, energy, and attack. Put stats into those, and then dolly out the rest of the stats here and there. The big reason why I didn't cap anything off was because I wanted a little bit more diversity. Because I knew I was going towards Ajna. And Ajna doesn't like being heavy-handed in a stat. They want to be a little bit more flatline. They might peak a little bit, but they want to try to stay more or less flatline.
Fair enough. Sorry, I forgot where we were at. We were talking about the points, and comparing it to everybody else. So when you started building your fighter, you were 100%. You knew what you wanted to do, and you went right to it. I think it was easy to assign. You knew you didn't need awareness. You didn't really need that much aura.
Yeah.
So there was just like certain ones that were easily sort of zeroed off or close to zeroed off.
Yeah.
And you just went from there, filling the rest. Where Axel wasn't too sure what he wanted to do. He wanted to make a rogue archetype, which is more of a D&D thing, but he had to figure out how to transition that into Genesis. Right? So he had to figure out how he was converting that. Where you started as a fighter, and we know the core concept of a fighter.
Yeah.
And then he had to figure out what is the concept of a rogue from D&D. He ended up going more of an archer rogue, so like high damage, low survivability. But he was fine. I think he did fine, other than the bolt shot that hit him in the face, I think.
He had a few rolls where what's that roll you have to make when you're trying to do the attack to see if it succeeds?
It's really just called an attack roll.
Oh yeah, so he did his attack rolls, and those were failing for his first like 4 attacks. It's like, this is rough.
And he had the highest. He has +5 to his attack.
Oh yeah, his attack, when it did land, it hurt. Like, he did well.
Yeah.
All right, so we talked a little bit about the design, and I got a better understanding of where you took some creative freedoms and where you adhered a little bit closer to the RPG, D&D kind of archetype. So, and the other part I really loved was you went through the entire card library and narrowed it down to the cards that you felt were suitable for this format, and said, these are the cards we're going to be focusing on when it comes to deck building. And so I thought those things were definitely really solid, and I really enjoyed that aspect of it. Now, let's talk a little bit about that campaign itself and how we went through it. So, what was the storyline?
So, to be fair, we actually technically never got into the main plot line.
Okay.
But that doesn't mean there was no storyline. Which is because there was the introduction of what you guys...
just group them, I think.
So our basic storyline, for anybody who wasn't involved, I didn't hear it at all, is that all of our four players, their characters, for whatever reason, we haven't explored that yet, are currently at the Sahas libraries, working as guards because they want to get into Sahas. But you don't just get into... They don't just go, oh yeah, you're in! If they're going, yeah, you're in, you're probably going to be an experiment. It's that. So they've been put on guard duty, and I had them. I don't know if I said it in the game, but I had them that you'd already been there for about a week, but you've been doing a lot of basic stuff, and essentially a report of a massive wolf attacking travelers coming to the libraries was spotted. So you guys were sent out by one of the captains of the guards to go deal with this wolf. And then you guys, as you did, you traveled. About halfway down your travel, a farmer crossed your path, and at first it looked like you guys were just going to ignore it and intimidate it away. But I forget who. So I think Steve decided to at least give a small talk to it, and you guys learned that there was bandits down that path harassing the farmers. Hoping to get brownie points for Sahas, you guys are like, "Hey, let's go deal with these bandits." And so you did so. And I think you guys defeated them pretty easily.
So my feeling was initially the combat felt a little rough. I did not know if we were going to get through it, especially not knowing what the characters were. So one thing that was really cool that you did was having the opponents. So let's look at them. Having them face down at the beginning was really interesting because it added that element of uncertainty. Just this idea that we had no idea who we were facing, how difficult they were, what their abilities were like. Everything was kind of in the dark. They just looked like we knew that there were two people carrying a sword, one person in cloak, and one person with bow and arrow. So we knew they were enemies. We knew that they were they could hurt us, but we didn't know by how much.
And that's one of the things I'm still not sure of is some of the face down mechanics, whether it's worth it or not. So in your opinion, was it worth it? Was it good tension, or was it what was it to you?
First I want to say shout out to Steven and Darren for watching. Thanks for joining. And so for me, when it came down to the face down mechanics, I think when I think of the storytelling of it, realistically, I think instead of face down, if one side was the full card and the other side was just the art, and we could tell, okay, this person, there's two people with swords, this person has a shield, so they probably are a little bit more have a little bit more defense. Like, these are things we could.
You mean like this?
Yeah, so it's like that. It's definitely playing. Like, even having the chi gives us too much information, right? That's true. Because we had to spend time and do skill checks and things like that to observe any of the stats. But if you think of it in a realistic setting, and I'm just walking and I can see there's four people off in the distance, maybe I can't see the shield, maybe I won't see the glimmer of the sword because it's sheath or something like that, but I can see that there's four people. So the face down cards definitely told us there were four people. And then as we got more information, maybe on the first observation check or something like that, we see, okay, there's three there are three guys and a girl, and they're like how they're dressed, what they're carrying, stuff like that. But not knowing their HP, aura, energy reduction, awareness, all these things were, I think, really good storytelling pieces, because at the same time, they wouldn't know this information about us either. They wouldn't have known that, I don't know, like Zalakor was this powerful mage that can hit at the corners the way he could. So it gave kind of that hidden knowledge of how the story unfolds. At the end of the day, I liked it. And Steve chimes in, I like the face down aspect given the unknown quantity of a random encounter that encourages the roleplay aspect. And that's what I was trying to say. Of examining an opponent's pre-fight or even during it. It changed. It was enough of a difference that it moved it away from just the standard Genesis towards the RPG Genesis. And that part I did appreciate.
One thing we didn't notice is the board changed the size.
No, I definitely.
This is definitely not the same grid.
Yep. No. So actually, the moment you revealed it, the first thing that went into my mind was like, how do we produce these? Like, how, if we were to make this game a physical game, how would we make these maps and arenas? And that was my first problem. So there's the business side that kind of clicked on, and I was like, all right, don't say this out loud. Don't say this out loud. But I did. I wish that the terrain played more of an effect, because I felt like even though you said, okay, here's this unpassable river, we still had a lot of moments of people standing like right here, and this felt like a corner that really you shouldn't be standing on. And
I agree. That was more of a limitation of space. Like
Yeah.
I could have made the map bigger realistically,
Yeah.
but I felt like I didn't want to pigeonhole you guys all into just these tiny squares too
Yeah.
much.
There was another tree like right here. I feel like is missing.
I also agree that a tree would.
Yeah,
This tree.
the thick tree
Oh, do you know
was
what?
here,
Remember
and
that?
this tree was here.
You remember that annoying tree, Sid, that was there?
Yep.
Wasn't supposed to be there. This tree was not supposed to be here.
Did that happen because
so,
when you rotated the board, when you first placed it, you rotated the board a little bit, and that caused things to mess up?
No, so there was something extra on this board that wasn't here because you guys decided to come here first. So when I quickly had to, when we came to this board, I pasted it, had to grab it from underneath this tree and hide it. And when I did that, this got moved over. This got flipped, I believe, over here. And I just didn't notice it at all.
Yeah.
I literally didn't notice it until you're telling me right now.
Yeah. C'est la vie, we still won.
Yeah.
So the huge win that I would take out of this is that coming from the Genesis space into this, I the amount of times I had to ask, does this act like Genesis or does it act differently? It was more just that wonderful realization of how much you translated the core rules of Genesis into this. I think that was so beautifully executed and imported over that it was almost unbelievable at how well it just worked. The one thing I would say was a bit of a detriment was when I went to go play left hook, for example. I go to play left hook. So here's a few things. First, I have to draw left hook. Then I go to play it. And now I have to roll to see if it succeeds. Then I roll to see if it succeeds.
Yeah.
Then I have to roll to see how much damage it does. It just felt like there was too much room for a card that should be relatively stable, like left hook, to just crumble. And that was the one thing that I wish there was. Maybe the check was too low at times, but then you had 10 plus the chi, right? And I realize now as we're talking about this, we're totally alienating the people who are watching, so I'm so sorry. But let's grab Fire Chains, for example. Fire Chains has this chi of 3, meaning that if I want to play this, I have to first get it into my hand and get a target in its awareness, which are difficult enough tasks to do. Once I get it into my awareness, and now to see if this card even can resolve, I have to roll d20 and get the chi plus 10 or higher. So in this case, it's 13 or higher to see if it lands. And then if it does damage, now it's randomized on the amount of damage. So a bolt shot could do anywhere from 1 damage to, what's its cap? D6. So a bolt shot could hit for 6, which is awesome. It could also just hit for 1. So there was these kind of like, do you know what I'm trying to say? Like, it just felt like,
so I can explain this pretty easily because it is it's actually where the difference between Genesis and the RPG come in. This is actually the exact spot. So in Genesis, everything you do, will hit unless your opponent does something.
Yeah.
Where in an RPG, it's life is variable. Your opponent isn't just standing there going to let you punch them.
Yeah.
You have to. They're dodging. They have armor. They have shields. You have to solidly hit. And even if you hit, how good was that hit? Was it a glancing blow? Was it straight to the head? And that's literally the difference.
Okay, I see what you're trying to translate over.
But it is also interesting that for the damage chart, the only one that has the greatest flaw is the 2. Because the 1 is just, you're going to take 1 damage. But the 2 is a D2, so you have a chance to do 1 less. But once you get past that, every other one has a chance to do way more than it should be doing.
Yes, for sure. It would be a little bit of a sad part if you have a card that hits for 7, like Primordial Force, and it rolls a 1 on that D12. that would be sad.
Or it'd be great.
I'm almost thinking,
We'll all remember that moment. We'll always remember that moment where the primordial force swang and hit for one.
Yeah. So I guess at the end of the day, it's not so much my. I just maybe if there was some more aspect of, uh, I don't know. It the tension I'm having is the conflict of not just executing ability, how well it's successful, how much damage it deals. There's that tension with the tension that you have in CCG, which is the RNG of just getting the cards you want when you need them. And now you're combining these two levels of tension together to make a kind of, not a bad feeling, but almost like, just an unstable moment. I almost feel like, for the champions, if there was a card that they could have that was, easier to fish for, or like you can skip your draw to get another card that you know for certain it's gonna go. So from my case, like left hook, I could skip my draw and guarantee grabbing a left hook from my subconscious or something like that. That way I know like I can mitigate the RNG of it, because if I'm like, oh, I don't care, all I need right now is a left hook to win this fight or to stabilize myself. I don't know. It's just a suggestion. But
yeah. So I'll tell you why. And actually, I gave you guys. So I think I let you guys start with 3 cards.
Yeah.
Was that the thing? So my actual intention was only to give you guys 2 cards. And I was actually perceiving the deck as these are just bonus things to me. What you get here is bonus. These are extra effects that if you get them, awesome. If you don't get them, you're gonna still continue. You're still gonna be swinging with your attack. You're still gonna be strategizing with each other, getting into positions to stop other things.
Yeah. I think we found, at least in my case, I found more often than not, drawing the cards a little bit more essential than having my base attack. And maybe that's just the way I design my character, because I'm like looking at my attack versus Axel's attack, and I was like, yeah, mine's was way lower than I kind of expected it to be. I thought 3 points in attack was going to be enough, or an attack of 3 was going to be enough. And it turned out,
I would say attack of 3 is pretty good.
Yeah.
So the funny thing is about Axel's character, he ended up asking for help building his character, and I pushed him to go to 5 attack. But when I had the 5 attack point in the builder, I literally said, I hope nobody takes this. Because I was like, it is so swingy. Like being able to do 8 damage, that's crazy amount. But I'm like, I really don't have much else to put here for attack 5, and I was trying to make it very streamlined. Because when I actually had all the points, the starting point system, I think we had seven different things to place points. When I originally designed it, there was like 10, and there was just way too much.
Yeah.
Because I think I had armor being its own stat, or I think it was called evasion or something, and I had speed being its own stat as well, so allowing people to be faster than just the normal Genesis stuff. And it was just like there's too much, just too much. Cut it down, clean it up, go from there.
Yeah. I think
I was gonna say.
Sorry, what were you gonna say?
I was gonna say one thing that was very funny about the bandit fight here was how bad this mage did nothing. Well, so the archer came over and started fighting over here, and the mage was like, "I'm gonna do that too." Started coming over here, and he couldn't get past the mage, and I was like, "Well, the archer is blocking the path. All right, he's gonna come back this way." He couldn't do anything from this spot. Ran up this spot, still wasn't in range of anybody. Finally it was around turn 4 where he got to make 1 attack and then died.
Yeah. Like he died in 1 attack. And I don't know who hit him for 5. I think it was the air elemental that hit him for 5.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was just a massacre. Yeah. So all in all, I love the campaign. I had a lot of fun with this combat. I did like how it shifted from we were going through the storytelling, which was very narrative. But once you got into the combat, you were very engaged in the combat. And when I think about a real world kind of like, and I can't say real world, we're in fantasy world, of course, but like if I were to think about how it would feel to be in that situation, yeah, it's a lot of back and forth conversations, going down your path, and then once you're in combat, you're not gonna be thinking about anything else. You're so focused on this board, you're so focused on surviving the fight that's what we did as heroes. We just everything, the rest of the storyline kind of got set aside for a few seconds, and we just focused on surviving against these four. So
Yeah.
I think I really enjoyed that. Kudos on that.
There was an interesting point where I don't think you guys really thought about it, but all four of them, when the angel dropped on the board, they were like shaking in their boots. If you guys had literally told them to stand down, they probably would have stood down.
We could have, but I think we also wanted to experience what the devastating power of the angel was like. Because the angel's strong in the CCG, we need to see how well it converted over, and it converted over really well. The realization it was like, pardon?
It's even higher than normal. I was saying its survivability was even higher than normal.
Yeah, and then there was this factor of like, it hit the table, and we were like, yeah, let's help it kill the fighters, and then someone was like, no, it can just fly over and kill the archer, and I was like, it can. And it did, and that was just, it was awesome. It's just like, it just wrecked the board state because the archer now could not focus on us at all, had to completely focus on destroying the angel. I tag teamed with Zalakor really well with the air elemental. Zalakor's built in, plus my whole thing of giving air weakness to things was really, really great synergy. I think the gameplay just felt really, really organic, flowed really well. And then we had the wonderful moment that after we killed 3 other bandits, the 4th one decided, we decided to talk to him, and then we kidnapped him, basically.
You offered him your life.
Yes.
And you guys renamed him. And I swear I just put him on the board, but I cannot find him again. He got his own personal new name. I'm reprinting him again. I gotta save him. In case I forget to save him. I will save him right now. There we go. He is now Mr. Bag.
Yes, Mr. Bag. Who and there's so much good story with Mr. Bag here. But I think this is actually one of those things that leans into the RPG really, really well, which was, as a DM, you kind of gave us the opportunity to run with the storyline the way we wanted to. And when we offered this person the opportunity to join us and fight the big bad, which was this giant wolf, which we all thought was going to be lightless. And I was a little disappointed that it wasn't lightless. But we had to go fight this big bad wolf. And we forced Mr. Bag to join us and go on that journey. You let us. You let us control the storyline the way we felt we could. And I think that's just my aspect of like not having played RPGs, and but this is how I would really like the feel of that to be, where it's like, as players, this is what we want to do, and we just do it, and the story adapts to that.
Yeah, at the end of the day, an RPG is the stories of the players, and whatever they want to do is realistically that should be happening. Mm-hmm. Of course, there's consequences when they do bad things as well, though.
Yeah. Did you expect us to bring Mr. Bag with us and for him to do the craziness that he did?
Not at all. No, not at all. Like I said, starting off, I didn't expect. I think I said this. I didn't expect you guys to go to the bandit fight first. I was planned for the wolf fight to be the first thing. The farmer coming by was literally only there originally to give you guys foreshadowing. Hey, there's bandits this way.
Yeah.
But then you guys are like, we're gonna go deal with these bandits, and I'm like, all right, let's go. But I think it actually worked out better because I think the wolf fight did feel more like a boss battle.
Yeah.
Where this one wasn't really a boss battle.
Yeah. And then the interesting thing was, so when we met with that traveler at the beginning, I actually, in the back of my mind, there were a lot of times where I wanted to interrupt and to conduct things and go particular ways. But the one thing I know about my character, and I know my character's background, the other players don't because we haven't had that conversation yet. But in my character's background, she wouldn't want to talk a lot. She does not want to be noticed. She wants to do her mission and be set aside. But the fact that she came from Ajna, and Ajna is a city of helping people in need and supporting each other, as we see from the adoption of Erica, it was very much the decision of when we started debating, do we help this person or not? That's when I spoke up. But until that moment, I was quiet during the entire debate.
That's true.
So
I
had to
a lot of people were quiet. I was like worried. I was worried that none of you guys were like gonna do anything.
Yeah. Because I had to put aside my game designer hat and my I know the Genesis lore type of persona and be like, no, what would my character do? And my character would be quiet and listen to what everyone's saying, and then at the end be like, no, we need to take the moral high ground here. We need to help people. And I had to. It was interesting stepping into that role. So, no, I like this engagement. I thought that was really cool. And then at that point, we took Mr. Bags with us, and he led us towards the wolf's den. And this was supposed to be the major, kind of like the key storyline that we were kind of walking into. So there was a wolf that was terrorizing the farm area of Sahas, right? And
yeah, storyline wise, it was just attacking people on the roads.
Okay.
But yes, so people leaving the farm area would have been part of that too.
And then we had to go and defeat the wolf. So there were a few elements of this that I really enjoyed. But first and foremost, this is a standard size board that you brought out that we played on.
It is.
Which is really cool. And then you had terrain, pre-arranged terrain. You had rocks, you had trees, there was a thick tree, and all these had different attributes, different aspects. Immediately, I see this, I'm like, this is publishable. This is something that can very easily convert from something we're doing as a side hobby, enjoyment of the game, to something that other people could be playing at home themselves. So I think it was really great incorporating these cards and then creating these custom cards that work with it just as well. So that was my first thing walking into this environment. Yeah, so tell me, what was your thought process behind designing this boss?
Okay, well, that's a good question. Actually, so I guess I designed him first. Or did I? I gotta remember. I don't know. I don't know if I did design him first. Did I? Oh, I think I knew that I wanted play it. See, my issue is because you guys didn't get to the main plot, which is literally like 5 seconds away. As soon as we get back to this, if we get back to it, it's literally the actual like focal plot line.
Okay.
This was just going to be the starting. Let's see how combat works in the RPG RPG Genesis game.
Yeah.
Was the starting point. And then I know I wanted a unique thing. I didn't want to actually fight humans, which we did secondary, because that's pretty common to Genesis. And I'm sure we'll fight many humans the further we go on. There's a lot of them. But it was just it's a cool creature that people understand that it's a creature that comes in packs. So it already has this natural theme about it, about many of them being summoned and many of them showing up. And it's a creature that would be, sometimes scares people. It's a pretty common creature, I think, as a starting creature. And I did want it to make it a champion. We talked about that question. I think I asked the question about races. We talked about core, and I think I asked you about animals, and you were like, I don't know. We never had an animal before. And then I went about thinking about it. I'm like, okay, well, how would an animal get about its conduit? Well, here. What if it was stabbed by its conduit? It's literally embedded in the side of it,
Mm-hmm.
and that's how it's received it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that was the starting concept. The hardest part was figuring out how do I balance a boss
Yeah.
fight without ever having a combat in the RPG before.
Yeah.
And I started like in our game we talked about why couldn't they be hunting hounds? They were hunting hounds, and I'm like, what if this is too easy? What if this is just super simple? Because like everything is gonna kill a hunting hound, and a Jalarian hound. You know, it looks much cooler. It looks more like a wolf itself.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I swapped out to.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the Chilean Hounds definitely got pushed. Pushed the combat quite a bit. The ambush mechanic was kind of crazy, especially when we realized that it wasn't just going to be dropping them adjacent to him like a normal beacon would be, but the Chilean Hounds could show up anywhere on the edge of the arena, which was a really cool concept. But I think we had this pinnacle moment where Zalakor made the very brave decision to run up to the wolf and pull the dagger out, and
Yeah.
that was I think if it wasn't for that, we probably would have lost that fight. Like, it was getting really intense there. I know I would have died because the big turning moment to actually get us to win this was dropping the meteorite, and the meteorite hit everyone for 8, and that dropped me down to 1 health.
Yeah. So
if there were any more creatures, if the battle went on for just one more round, I was dead. I was toast. So I think having Zalakor do that move, it was really awesome. It was a very dramatic moment, and all of a sudden all these Jalarian hounds just disappeared, and then it was like, okay, let's focus. Let's just kill him and end this right now. So that was a really cool kind of dynamic story moment that you wouldn't get in a normal game of Genesis.
It's true. And it was great seeing you guys trying to strategize how to get, I think, Axel to the wolf.
Yeah,
because there was this line where Axel's just like, I just gotta get to him and hit him, and you guys were just like, well, what if I move here and this guy moves here? And Axel refused to try to climb on this rock. He was not having it. He would not go on this rock.
Yep. That was just not happening. Yeah, that was really cool. I had like that special plan in place, being like, okay, if they sneak up behind me, I had a shoulder throw, so I could toss them out of the way to clear the path. No, I failed the toss, the execute on the shoulder throw. I think that's the part that
I was like so great. Yeah. I was like, oh man, you set that up.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
And I think that's the thing that makes me a little bit bitter with the execution rule or the trigger rule, is the fact that all of a sudden, like, I had this plan set up, I had the perfect like movement for it all, and then it just failed because of that initial roll. And then on top of that, Axel had the same situation, had the killing shot, and then failed on the roll for it, the attack roll. So it's just those little moments that's like, I get what you're trying to do, and flavor-wise, it makes perfect sense. So I'm not trying to attack that part of it. It's just those little moments that it's like, okay, now we got to re-strategize. And it just makes you a little bitter, because you're like, in Genesis, this would have succeeded. But this is the RPG, so it doesn't succeed. Yeah. No, that was really cool. And then just to end it off, which was kind of great, was the killing blow was done by Mr. Bag himself, coming in, attacking the wolf. And I think the best part about this, which we didn't realize at the moment, and I just realized it right now, is that Mr. Bag, who looks like a huntsman, killed the big bad wolf. Yep, that happened. That happened in our Genesis RPG. The huntsman killed the wolf. There were a lot of great moments in that fight. I especially liked like how Zalakor, he's separated from us over here, and then went and dealt with a lot of combat and was really putting the pressure on the wolf. The 3 of us kind of got clustered back here. 4 of us with Mr. Bag got clustered back here, and we really had to work as a team. with especially with Merrick coming in and healing a bunch of us at a particular moment was really solid. There was a lot of strategizing that made it feel much like a four-player team Genesis type of combat moment. And
Mm-hmm.
those were the moments that really stuck with me, and I appreciate it a lot. Um, and then, so I guess my question to you would be, what are some of the things that you'd want to revisit or redo if you were to redo this campaign, redesign it?
Okay, so we'll start with the one that we I've already talked with Will about. So I did ask if there's any issues for people to message me. Will told me about the one, which I already knew about. So AOE's and RPGs, they're usually more specific. So when you play an AOE, it usually states make a save or take half, or it says make a save and take none. And the problem with this is I have to either decide they're all one thing because I can't go
Yep.
back and rewrite all the Genesis or all the other thing. So that's the thing. It's like maybe it's, and that's one I've been fighting about is should it do none? Should it do half? And I even thought should it just do one damage, one guaranteed damage because it's in your area of effect.
Yeah.
And that's one I struggled with because if you thought about that meteorite, if it was just it did half, it was 4 damage to everything, and that's still fine because in the grand scheme of Genesis, meteorite usually does 5.
Yeah.
But in the RPG, people get a save because there's a meteor dropping down. They're going to slightly take cover. They're going to try to avoid some of the meteors coming down at you. So they try to take less. But
Yeah.
and I don't know what the right answer for that one is specifically.
You know,
Because otherwise, it comes back to AoE's become really strong again.
I have a suggestion for that. Why don't you combine it with the speed of the AoE? So if it's action speed and you make the save, then you take 0. If it's swift speed and you make the save, you take half.
That's definitely possible.
Because then it's like, well, if the flavor is, let's say meteorites hitting the arena, and the reason why you prevented it is because you had the time to go hide under cover. Well, then it has to be a slower effect for us to find the time to do it. But if all of a sudden you and someone else are duking, to say me and a warrior are duking it out, and out of nowhere a bolt shot comes at me from the side, and I'm able to like think fast enough to dodge out of the way, well, that's still gonna be a glancing hit. So that's why I'm thinking like it might come down to the speed of the effect, and that way you can tie it into you can do a little bit of both. Because like for me, also the feel of it is if this giant meteorite's coming down, it's hitting us for 8. 8 is a significant amount of damage, especially if you think of like a wolf. The wolf's at 22, so 8 is a quarter of its health about.
Yeah.
That's a quarter of your health coming at you. That's a pretty significant sized meteorite. I feel like there might not be a way to get out of the range of that damage. Like it's pretty cataclysmic. But something like
so I think you're starting to argue. I think more that it should have been half if it passes its save because you can't fully get out of the way.
That or the amount of damage determines on if it should be half or fully avoidable. Or if it's just, if you make the save, then you reduce it by a constant number. So there's a few options to explore, right?
Yeah.
So, but I think, like when I think of it, like when I look at a card like Tsunami or Meteorite, those don't feel avoidable. But Bolt Shot does feel avoidable. So I don't know what it is. If it's, maybe it's awareness based. Like you can only make a save if you are, if you are adjacent to a spot that's outside of the awareness of the AOE. So like Bolt Shot's coming in like this. You have 3 spots that you could deke out to, so you can avoid it. But like if you're here, then like if you're in the middle of the tsunami, then you always have to take the full damage and you can't save it. There's no way to avoid it. So I'm just saying there's some options to think about. That may overcomplicate the rule, but
Yeah.
It depends on how much you want to lean towards flavor or on how much you want to lean towards mechanics.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay. All right.
I will think on that. And like I said, I'm unsure about the starting hand size. I have not sure because like my original view is these are extra little treats.
Yeah.
So what was your thoughts with starting with 3 cards?
So I would go back to what's the overarching purpose of them. Are they if you want to make them extra little treats, then I would almost say just don't start with a starting hand size and then just draw a card a turn and then see how it goes. Or like you could have a particular stat that determines how many cards you start with. So if you're more mentally inclined, you start off with more. But if you're more physically inclined, then you start off with less. Or is the purpose of it
that did exist once? Sid,
yeah.
It did exist.
Or if the purpose of it is that it's your actual thoughts the way it is in Genesis, then I would just say start with a starting hand size of 5, because we are always going to lean on the cards in our hand first, and then look into how do we play our built-in attack. Now, and I think part of it is also there wasn't too much of a punishment of playing cards. Now, if the punishment for playing cards was much more severe, then you're less likely to play them. You're going to only play them when you need to play them, compared to playing them frequently.
Will actually had the reverse perspective. He felt that it was too painful to play cards.
Really? Well, it could just be his resource system. Like for me,
and that's the one thing.
Yeah.
You were a fighter who put a lot of energy.
Yeah.
And I don't remember too much of what he played.
Yeah.
Like I know the meteor went, but he has 0 energy, much like Steve here.
Yeah.
And that could have been the issue for them.
Yeah.
And I could see that. I would easily see that if they had a high energy card and playing one, losing you lose a lot of timeline. But that's also that's why like drawing less cards is less hampering. And I might actually just tie the hand size to level. It's another thing I might tie.
Yeah, like I did that for the dungeon crawler, where it's like as you got done through dungeon and dungeon, you got more and more resources to help you with it.
Yeah.
So yeah,
so
as you level
areas
up,
for me to fix up, for sure. Because the one thing, like, if you all started with 5 cards, and then you're facing one enemy who starts with 5 cards, it's a bit much.
Yeah. So it all comes down to what you're in. Again, it's the balance between flavor and mechanic and drive. Like the thing is, in this particular format, with aura not being easily recoverable, having high energy reduction is way more valuable than having high aura. Because aura is finite, where a high energy reduction makes a lot of my cards free. Like Bolt Shot is free for me, Left Hook is free for me. Those cards in my hand aren't added little bonus. They're just additional attacks that I have that are just free. Where having a high aura, it doesn't matter if you have 125 aura or 75 aura, Tsunami still costs you 18.
Yeah.
And so
very true.
I think that's the big issue, especially when Will played Call to the Bones in that one matchup. And I was just like, this does not feel worth it. Because the big thing about Call to the Bones is, now imagine if you were playing a Genesis tournament where your aura didn't reset as you went from game to game. Would you really play so many Call to the Bones in your first game? Probably not.
No, not.
But you might still be inclined to play a couple of those Bolt Shots, especially if you have an energy reduction of 3. So I think that's the big discrepancy you're feeling, is that aura in here is not as comfortable as it is in the TCG.
Now, but on a side note, is summons on the opposite side were. Because if they didn't die, they returned back to the timeline.
Yeah.
Where technique
did
go to the timeline when you played them. If you hit with them. Well, that's a good question. You guys chose. Did you guys take a short rest or no? You chose not to take a short rest.
We didn't take
at
a
the
short
end of the
rest. No, we took a long rest at the end of the wolf fight.
Yeah. How did you feel about having those two options at the end of the fight of the bandit fight?
I'm still a little confused on how all that kind of just worked. I just followed what you told me to do. So my understanding was if you played a card and it was successful, it went to your memories. If you played a card and it failed, it went to your subconscious, or was just set aside.
We were just using it because we had the subconscious box.
Yeah.
Ultimately, I would have changed that text.
And then if you do a short rest, you take the card from your subconscious and you put them back into your deck. If you do a long rest, you take all your cards and put them back into your deck, right?
Yeah.
I think the rest concept is very familiar to me. I grew up on Final Fantasies, so the idea of resting in an RPG seems very fine and legit. The restoration of cards, yes, it's nice. Of course, you need a way to restore those cards. But at the same time, I don't think it made a huge difference because one of my big pain points was I drew a card during the bandit fight that I wish I had drawn during the wolf fight. And there's no way of making those change. The Purifying Wave.
Yes. The Purifying Wave, yes.
Because Purifying Wave would have definitely changed things in the wolf fight where we may not have needed that meteorite. So I don't know how I feel about those two things.
So we didn't. Well, we really haven't experienced the short rest.
Yeah.
We haven't used it, right? And that won't be able to really fully grasp it till then, because the more. I'll tell you that's actually more built on a issue I have with common RPGs. So other RPGs, pretty much there's no downside to resting at any time. You just do it. You fought a bunch of guys. There's a bunch of enemies in the next room. Let's just take a short rest. Or let's just take a long rest. And it's just like, oh, you're trying to save the world. You're gonna take a 8-hour nap right now. It's like, oh, okay. And me as the DM, I can't. I have two options. I attack you in your sleep.
Okay.
Or I do nothing. Those are the two options. And I attack you in the sleep. The attack finishes because you guys have probably still won that. All right, let's continue our sleep. And then you go back to sleeping again. It's like, all right.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure that if it's more than 4 hours, it's no longer a nap, though. Just saying. As someone who lives off of naps, because I haven't been sleeping well over the past few weeks. No. If it's less than 4 hours, it's a nap. But after that, it's actual sleep. So I just want to jump into the comments a little bit because Steven has been adding quite a bit. Random damage aspect is definitely D&D centric. It represents the opponent dodging. The damage swings both ways. So that's actually a good point. So the damage does swing both ways. If you're facing the primordial force, it may hit you for low, but your opponent can also hit you for low. We did see that at moments where the opponent would land an attack, but it's only hitting for 1. Or we land an attack that seems very futile, but all of a sudden it's hitting for a lot. Like the meteorite hitting for 8 was way more than I was expecting it to. It does kind of swing both ways, and it will balance out in the end. I think it's one of those things about playing dice games. It's part of the reason why I stopped playing Warhammer is I'm not a big fan of games that are so dice centric, because your game experience is so variable, but it's not variable for the reasons I like it being variable. I'm okay with my card draw being bad in Genesis. I don't like it in Magic, and I could get to that at some other point. But card draw being bad in Genesis is different because every card is still playable, and you have to learn how to play with what you got. If you got a bad hand and you give up, that's on you. Because there are ways to still stall, delay, wait for the right moment to play the cards you got. And if you have nothing but bad cards in your hand, then my question is, why are those cards in your deck to begin with? Unless you're doing a draft. That's a whole other thing. So for Genesis, when you lose, it's a lot more due to your strategy than it is any other factor. But in here, I don't want to play something like... That's part of the reason I had Mystical Spear in the fight against the bandits. I never once played it because every time I thought about playing it, I'm like, I don't want to pay the resources, play this card, and worse, the thing that's worse than the attack roll failing is if I roll and I only hit for 1. That's way worse than the attack roll failing. So that's why, like, all of a sudden these cards that are high damage value cards, I almost just don't want to play.
That's fair.
So that's,
you get used to that.
Yeah,
Once you played RPGs enough.
But no, that's completely a me
so
thing.
Used to it. That's
that's a complete me thing. That's not an RPG thing. That's not a critique on you at all. That's just who I am. So that's why I'd rather, if I were to redesign my deck, I would pull so many of those cards out for cards that were just pure free damage. And that way, if I hit for 1, it doesn't matter because I essentially pay no resources. If I were to redesign my character, the thing I would look at is maybe dropping my energy stat or dropping my chi stat or dropping some of my other stats, upping my base attack to the archers, Axel's attack, and then have high energy so I can play cards like Bolt Shot. And that way, if Bolt Shot still hits for 1, I'm cool with that because I paid nothing for it. And if it fails, then I just get another try at some other point. So it's just one of those that I didn't build my character around the way I like to play games because this was my first time playing an RPG. So I didn't know what I was looking for. So it's not a gripe towards anything. It's just you live, you learn.
No worries. Like I said, it's all test stuff. It's just I threw stuff down and see what works.
Yeah. So
and I think you just gave me a new idea, and I would maybe, one thing that I would maybe change is I think at the edge of at 4 points for energy and 4 points for attack, I probably wouldn't have the 5th point be going up. So like energy wouldn't go up to 5 energy. It would probably just increase the damage of all techniques you play to do a bonus 1 damage on all that.
Yes. That's actually the one thing I really loved about my built-in ability, which gave all the air damage, doing an additional 1 damage. I really like that because all of a sudden I knew that my built-in attack could hit at the very least 2. And I'm like, that's awesome. And like if my attack, if at a certain point, instead of rolling a D8, I rolled 2D4, I would like that way more because then I know my base attack is going to be doing 2. I'm going to be hitting on average a certain amount, but then I have also a way to cap out at hitting for 8 or something like that, right? Or 2D3s or something like that, so that my top tier is 6 damage, even though I don't think there's a dice on the table that actually just rolls 1, 2, or 3. But you know what I mean? Like if you have 2 dice that are rolling for a smaller number, then you have a bell curve compared to a flat line. That would change my perspective on the way I'm doing damage.
That is actually what I think is missing.
Yes. I think that would be a big change, especially on a card like Subjugation Strike. If I'm playing Substrike, I don't want to be hitting for 1. I'd rather roll 2d4 with a chance of hitting for 8, but an average of hitting, what's the average? 2.5 times 5 damage is the average. So Steven also says, I'm seeing it as the four players for a party, but we're also 1/4 of the champion that is facing the DM champion, or in the RPG terms, the encounter that has more threats than any one of us players technically be able to take on our own. I think that's in regards to the wolf. So no, this had to be in regards to the I don't remember the context of that. All right, next comment. My angel feels personally attacked with her low damage rolls. Yeah, like that's another thing. If the angel at 6 damage was rolling 2d4, it would have been a little bit more enjoyable, and you could feel that power of getting to that 6 attack. Now, this is the thing Steven points out. A terrain deck would be able to provide a ton of different obstacles or benefits, each with different abilities, and adding a chi cost to each means you could follow point cap rules when building encounters for adding difficulties. Now, this is a format that we play at Forbes before the pandemic happened. Was called Terrain, and it was a multiplayer format where you would extend the board by 1 or 2 columns, but for each spot you extended, you would grab a piece of terrain and put them on the board, and that would now consume a spot. So you'd actually create this dynamic board space, and that would drastically change the way the game's played. And I've always had this idea of having. You remember there was this format of Magic a long time ago. I think it's like Planner Chase or Plane Chase,
Yeah. Chase.
where
Yeah.
you would jump from world to world, and that would change the entire way people played because you got new inherent effects. I had this idea where you would have this pile of cards, and when you played your opponent, you flip over the top card of your deck and that deck would point out particular spots. So let's just say it said here, 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 and here. And on those spots, you had to put like 2 fortifications and an Inferno Pit. And these terrain pieces now had infinite health. And you put them onto those spots, and they're now part of the board. And you have to play the game in this new format or new way. And I thought that would be a really cool, dynamic way of playing Genesis. The reason why we never moved forward with it was we still are working on trying to get people to play the standard version of Genesis. So I don't want to push other formats too much. We saw what happened with Allies. It's an exciting format, but no one played it because everyone focused on standard.
I think Allies is a very fun format.
Yeah, I do too. I think it's a really great format that just needs a little bit more time before people start picking up, especially with more champions coming out. It should be much more interesting. So suggestion to mitigate failed rolls: you can force a success by sacrificing aura to make up the numbers the attempt missed by. That's actually kind of interesting and would really excite me as a fighter, but I think it could be abused a little bit too much.
So if we look at the bandits' special abilities, they had some. Specifically, if we look at the archer and the mage, so the archer had an ability for 10 aura to gain +2 to your next attack roll. The mage just got to pretend could reroll a miscast ability.
Yeah, that's actually not that bad. And if it was like an inherent ability that everyone had access to, that might be a little bit better. But again, I know the flavor that you're trying to hit with all this, so I'm not opposed to the way you did it. I think it was great. It's just like, I think, but also higher chi cards, it's harder to fail, isn't it? Or is it harder to succeed?
Higher chi cards.
So if I want to play a Substrike,
No,
I need to roll an 18, don't I, to make it work?
No. So Substrike, you're always hitting off of the opponent's AC.
Oh, my opponent's AC, yeah.
Yeah, you're thinking of the spell DC. Spell DC
okay.
is the opponent needs to make the DC equal to the chi.
Yeah. So I guess for me, what would be more interesting is since we built all our champion abilities based off of cards that currently existed, right? So we didn't have options to do some cool stuff. But I think as a fighter, something that would interest me is having an inherent ability that's, if I'm toe-to-toe to someone, their AC drops by 2 points. Or by 1 point or something like that. So that I have a little bit more success when I'm in combat. But if they can stay away from me or hit me from angles, then they're good. They can do that.
Yeah.
But I like this idea of me paying aura, especially as we talked about aura being much more finite in this game. The paying aura to increase your odds might be nice, or just reroll could be useful. But I don't know. Alteration should probably always save versus AoE, base damage, taking half, no matter the speed. Yeah, I don't. It depends on the alteration. Sometimes the flavor doesn't always make sense if the alteration survives, right? Like, if you're dropping a meteorite, these trees aren't surviving. Maybe the rock will. Maybe the rock would get tossed somewhere else more flavorfully. But the trees, they're gone.
That was like when I was trying to suggest to Axel, I'm like, you could kill the rock if it's that much of an issue.
Yeah, how much health is
he didn't want to try it.
Now, if I wanted to attack a wall, do I still have to do an AC check?
Or so, I think I would say no.
Okay.
I currently don't have. Well, like it does have a chi, so technically, if I was to say yes, it would have a 15. AC. It does have an AC prepared, but I didn't really plan for that. but I don't think it's not dodging.
Yeah, it's not dodging. Now, I know certain people who would try to attack a rock and miss. And that's just because they are who they are.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm just like, we are trained warriors. I'm pretty sure if I want to swing my sword against this rock, I'm gonna connect. So, I like how you still have the crate ability on the large rock, even though you really didn't need it.
Well, we don't know. You might come to a guy who's going to start creating large rocks.
I'll play that one card which returns all alterations to the owner's hand. Be like, now have to recreate them. And then for me, if I'm Steven again, high energy cards were being considered either dire need or last resort strategies, since it would literally burn away my possible powers if the fight went too long. Now, here's an interesting thing. He's saying that as a mage. He sees his deck as essential for his fighting prowess. So mages might need their deck a little bit more than me or Axel, where we're like, yeah, the deck's useful. It did help out sometimes. But a starting hand size of 3 would be fine for us. Where for a mage, like, no, I need a starting hand size of 6 or 7, or I need to be Nubia. Because for them, their built-in ability isn't the essential factor of them. And this is true about, if I think of an RPG like Diablo, if I'm playing the Barbarian, I'm just clicking and using my built-in attack as much as possible. But when I'm playing a Sorceress or a Mage, I'm using my hotkeys to launch fireballs, do ice attacks, things like that. And that's how I view the deck versus the built-in ability. So I think the idea of tailoring the hand size to the character makes more flavor sense to me the more I talk about it. And then the last thing he says, a short rest also gave aura and HP and aura back. Now, would you consider if the short rest gave you a fixed amount of aura and HP back, where long rest brought you to max?
Oh, so long rest did all. It just maxed everything. It brought you back to full.
Yeah.
For short was fixed rest. Yeah, it was fixed. I mean, it was 10 aura and 2 health.
Okay.
The notes have been raised.
Yeah. But I think that would be that's better for short rest, because then in that regards, short rest, and I do like what you had. So not playing any other RPGs, it just made like perfect sense that if as a team we decided to rest for the night, well then that wolf's still out there doing stuff. And it may get a boon. It may even level up in the time that we're resting. And for that reason, yeah, I think it made sense the way you played it out. I like that mechanic. And I think, but then for all that, you got to be thinking about the end mission moving forward. So like, we just defeated the wolf. Flavor wise, we don't know what the next mission is. Are we getting penalized for doing our long rest at this time? That's the question.
That's a great question, isn't it?
Yeah, so that's something I would think. And then also you could incorporate something like how many sessions did it take us to get, so imagine you have a final boss. The final boss is we have to fight Zamber Dragon, or just say something hypothetical like that. And it took us, you have the entire campaign planned out, and just say it takes us 4 sessions to do it. Well, then the Zamber Dragon might be benefited 4 times more than if we had just sat down and grinded it all in one day. And I think taking real world elements and penalties into the way we play the RPG could be interesting, but it could also backfire in the regards of like, we can't sit down to play because one of us has, a company to run. So, or maybe that character just sits out and doesn't gain the experience while the rest of the team goes on because they want to get to the Zamber Dragon before it levels up too much, right? So I think penalizing your players for taking too long and resting and trying to always stay at full is very much in theme of what Genesis is, of the pit fight and the start strong, struggle later. If you decided to recover to be strong again, well, you got to struggle even harder later on. So I think you played into those things really well. And if we follow through on like what are the pillars, the idea that Start strong, struggle later, the pit fight, always having options, favoring the defender, and the tactics element. I think all those things got carried over into the RPG really well. So, yeah, I like those. Steven says the boon system works great for an one-shot fixed scenario. I'd be interested to see how it works with a longer campaign. And yeah, I'm curious about that too. And I do think that as heroes, or like if you think of a giant story arc, I'm trying to think of. Oh, that's a bad reference. I'm not going to use that. But even if we take the story arc that's happening in the Genesis universe with the king and the war against Vishud and Sahas, the fact that those two countries have been attacked and have not attacked back, that actually built the king up longer, and that gave him the opportunity to team up with Fong and Long and build an army and ally with Ajna. So it's the same thing. Like for all the time you spend to recover and defend yourself, your opponent's doing the same thing. So, no, I think that's a cool concept. All right, I flattered you enough. All right, any last thoughts about the RPG? Is there anything?
I hope we get keep going a little bit more. At least to get, as far as I am, I hope to at least get through the initial stuff that I prep.
Yeah. Hey, that's how I feel about Genesis. At first, it was like, I just want to get through Alpha. And then it was like, I just want to get through J-Laura. And yeah. Just get through the stuff you've prepped. All right, cool. I think that's everything for this week's live stream. Thank you, Darren. Thank you, Steve, for coming out and chatting with us and watching the entire time. And anyone who watches this later, if you have ideas for RPGs, I'd love to hear about them, about how we can convert this thing over, because I think the idea of Genesis in the RPG format is a very viable future endeavor for us. So I'm excited for it, and I'm excited for all the work you've done, Alex. Thank you for that. All right.
Thank you.
All right, and just one final... yeah, thank you, Gabe. Don't forget, we have the tournament happening this weekend if you're available. It's a standard format. I'm not expecting a lot of people to show up, but we'll start pushing it a little bit more later this week. And then next week we have the new chapter for the Akashic Codex, which I'm really excited about. So catch everyone next week and have a good day. Bye.
Bye.